Good morning. Welcome back to another edition of Off the Grid with Sarah Overall. I'm Sarah Overall. I'm the founder and CEO of Decompression Dynamics and Associate Professor of History. Glad to be with you this morning and just for a little bit of a chat. There's been so much going on. It's been crazy times. It seems like it's turning 1 month to the next so quickly, as it's actually August the 1st, 2018 today. And just, wow, so many things coming from all directions. And I try often to just sit back and reflect on what it is all going on and try to piece it together and come up with some sort of a map of where we could maybe learn some things, or me, myself, actually try to learn some things of where we could gain, or I could gain some knowledge. And I think the biggest reason why is because I, in my classroom specifically, have such a sampling of society. That's how I feel. 26 years in the classroom, and I have a random sampling of people that come into my life, and they show up with different facial expressions on the first day, and different personalities, and they all walk in with a different set of life that they bring with them. And then we all intermix with each other, sometimes for 16 weeks. For this summer, it was just over 4 weeks. And we all sort of collide into one another in some form or fashion, and it ends up becoming some beautiful painting of some sort, and every painting's different. And I always wish sometimes that I could display that painting each and every time, and if I could go back in time and have them all to have and to remember and put on display in a gallery, just to look back on where I've been. It's amazing. I still run into students, and sometimes collections of students, because they've remained friends or so forth, and it's like I go back and I think, wow, that's where we were together. And then of course me, myself, in my milestones of life, it was where I was, or the type of painting that I was at that time. Maybe I was pastel paintings and colors at that time. Maybe it was a happier time at that semester or that part of my life, or maybe the darker charcoals were used when it was a struggling time. But either way, classrooms each semester, it could be even per semester, per class. I could walk out of one room or even stay in that room, and 40 people can walk out and another 40 can walk in, and I've not moved, and it's the same room, and we can paint a totally different picture within the next 90 minutes. It's phenomenal what I've experienced as a professor. I don't even consider myself a professor. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is, honestly. I don't mark myself with that title. I'm honored to be able to be what I consider an educator. I question that because honestly, every day I walk out and I've been educated. To be quite frank with you, over the years, I've had to go on urbandictionary.com many a times to be educated just in language, and I'm quite amused actually when I find out what the new verbiage is of certain things, and I'm sometimes amused with humor, and sometimes I'm like, well, that's quite clever. I get that now. I've also learned to be cautious, because some of the words that I've grown up using for years are now words that when they are spoken now mean something completely different, and you have to be exceptionally cautious on how it's said, because you can be quite surprised when you get looks on people's faces and you say, oh, no. Growing up, it meant something completely different. Please excuse what I have just said, and the context that it was said was so different. So it is a learning experience every day. But with that said, the big takeaway here is I have learned that it's a growth, it's a growing curve, and the educator and student have to grow together. I think we are making error in our educational system, tremendous error in thinking that we do know it all and that we are to map the course of the student and they are to comply. I think that is a big mistake. I have found that the more I have opened up opportunity for the student to have a role in the educational process as far as discussion, providing their opinion, letting them debate, discuss, of course, in very, I don't want to say controlled, although controlled is a good word, really, carefully moderated constraints that are professional and with academic rigor, I would say. It is very, very successful. And there is a lot of growth there. And we get very far with that. The days where the student sits and listens to the lecturer go on and on and on is done, I would say. I created this thing that I don't know what to call it, this process of learning, and I've been quite proud of it, and it's been very successful. And I call it the dinner table. And I do this with my students every semester, and they ask me all the time, are we getting in our dinner tables? Are we getting in our dinner tables? I say, yes, yes, and I try to make as much time every day if I can to do dinner tables. So what they have to do is they are required to be, on their own time, they are required to be versed in current affairs. So, of course, I teach history. I teach, American history. And they are required throughout the semester, at any given day, they are to be versed in current affairs. So they have to Google, they have to be on their social media, whatever it is they have to do. I expect them to come in and be able to discuss in a mature manner what's going on in the world. And so they have to be engaged in that and not be shut off from that and be just trapped in their own individual lives. So if I ask them, hey, what do you think about so-and-so's been going on, that earthquake in the Philippines, and what do you think about what's been going on in this latest discussion with the legislature and so forth, and I will push that bar pretty heavily there. And I start that conversation off when we meet together by the time we arrive in the classroom, as they would in any professional setting, I would suspect, as they get more in their professional lives. So in the dinner tables, what we do is that they are to sit together as if they're at an actual meeting location to have dinner at a restaurant, say. So they have to sit across from one another as if they're going to receive their menus and the waitress or server is going to take their order. And in those dinner table atmospheres, they will review their topics that we're discussing in the class. It helps them to review for their upcoming tests and quizzes. And if they're working on a group project, such as an upcoming presentation, they then work together on that. So their collaboration work is happening there. And I usually put them together in those dinner tables. Sometimes those are random, at which I like those too. I'll put them together randomly and I will mix them up. But if there is a big collaboration project, I'll put them together based on their majors. So if they're science majors and they're going into engineering, I usually put the engineering students together. If they're medical students, nursing students, things like that, that way they can get a cohort sustained together, and they usually do very, very well with that. So that's also a plus there too. Well, then as time goes on, we usually do a switch up with time, and then they're expected to turn to a social conversation. And then that social conversation is not to be limited, and I'm not allowing them to speak about, you know, what I consider sort of mundane conversation, because there's time to do that in the quad area there in the cafeteria, but to discuss current events and to talk about, you know, upcoming political environments such as elections and things like that, or, you know, professional conversations. And they do great. And boy, I just sit back and just walk around the room and just open my ears. And the growth of conversation and the maturity growth over time is absolutely fascinating. And it's because they are A, collaborating, B, put together at a dinner table setting, C, they are in an environment where they are exposed to discussion and healthy discussion, and they are pushed into things beyond the what I can't help but say, you know, the mundane discussion topics that we are inundated with daily in this social media that they are just saturated with, and they absolutely thrive with it. Their grades go up. When I give them an essay at the beginning of a semester, I get like 3 lines if I'm lucky, with very, very, very poor penmanship and grammatical capabilities. And by the end of the semester, they can't stop writing. Their hands are hurting. They're shaking their hands because they're writing so much. They thrive in this environment. Their discussions in class begin to grow. They're just alive because they're beginning to get the green light for the first time to think and speak and do this for themselves. The other thing that I do is I'll surprise it up too. I make it exciting for them because they won't know what to expect from day to day. I don't plan it out on them. I don't give them heads up so they can decide which day is the day to skip or whatever. So I make it exciting. So one day I'll come out and say, all right, everybody, put your stuff down. You know, we're going to do this. And it'll be some kind of a debatable topic. And I'll ask them to choose a side. And I'll say, all right, everybody that views it this way, you go to this side of the room. Everybody that views it to this side, you go to this side of the room. And then I have them speak. Whoever's on one side, they speak how they feel about it, and then vice versa. And then as we go back and forth debating the topic, they physically can move to the other side of the room. And then as they move to the other side of the room, so in other words, you can change people's opinions by just adding in your opinion. And I do that so that each time they can keep watching the visual representation of where people are standing on these varying topics. And it's very, very intriguing, and they love that. They ask me all the time if they can do that too. We put our backpacks down and we go outside in the quadrangle and go look at the art pieces. We walk to the library and go look at the art on the walls, come back and discuss it. We go and look at the glass cases inside the library, because those glass cases, every time, there's such effort put into those, especially for monthly issues such as Black History Month or Veterans Day or something like that. There's a lot of effort that goes into any glass case in any place of like a library, and take time to go look at that. What is that collection put there for? Maybe there's a special collection that's been brought in outside of the school. And I had a student, it warmed my heart so much. Oh my goodness. She stopped me in the hallway and she said to me, I took art history and I've never appreciated art as much as I do since this semester. And I took art history. I almost wanted to cry. I was so excited by that. So everything I say, though, is nothing about self-gain or self-importance or acknowledging myself. It is to record ideas, just ideas. That's all it is. I listen to other teachers every day. I listen to just people on the streets. I'm always sitting around. I've had people tell me so many times, actually, it was a couple of people that know me, and they have said it so many times. You're like the old guy that sits on the bench talking to everybody. I'm talking to everybody. I'm learning every single day. I went to, and I have it written here on their brochure because I want to get it right. It was in McKinney, downtown McKinney. I went to the final concert of the 2018 Summer Music Intensives, and it was the Arts and Music Guild at the North Texas Chamber Orchestra. It was phenomenal. These young people, it was amazing. Yes, the 2018 Summer Music Intensives. And it was on July 29th, the finale concert. It was in the faculty ensemble. It was there, and they had the students performing, and they were phenomenal. I'm telling you, I can't get over how wonderful they were. This was part of the Greater North Texas Youth Orchestra, and this collection of youth with their faculty, and of course the parents and the guardians were there that had brought them there and put them in this summer camp. I mean, I don't even know how to describe the event. It was so inspiring. And they are painting their own canvases, right? Their ability to create such beauty through music. And then, oh my gosh, the first song was the first song was Stairway to Heaven. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's awesome. Led Zeppelin right there. Yeah. I mean, it was fantastic. You've got the youth here with this orchestra that was phenomenal playing Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven. It was just outstanding. And then of course it went on from there, and then some of the youth stood up and took their turn at being conductors. It was, I don't even know how to give the accolades that are due here. So beautiful things are happening everywhere, but we never hear of it. And then also too, when I get my students that so often show up on the first day of school, they're, oh my goodness, so many times they're so broken. On that first day, you can see the pains in their faces and in their mannerisms, sometimes too in their hygiene. So broken. And I want to so many times say, where have you come from? What is going on, right? And a lot of it is from our schools. They've come from 12 years of other academic places, other institutions that had them in their care. And a lot of it was, it's a system where they've been I will use the word incarceration. I talk to students all the time. They're in athletics, and athletics is a wonderful thing, but only a few are participating in the bigger mass numbers, and so many are going at such a pace, and then they've got school on top of that, then the homework. I mean, the stress level is unbelievable. And so you've even got the highest of achievers that are just broken. It's just, there's such a level of brokenness. You know, I have to question, what happened to recess? Oh, was not recess so wonderful? I was outside this morning and yesterday in North Texas, and there is a beautiful breeze. I was at the bank this morning, and the banker, she was in this cold, bitter AC, and I was at the bank, and I was talking to the teller, and I said, "What'd you think of that lovely breeze this morning?" And she said, "Oh, I just stepped outside, and I just was." She said, "I just was, just before I could get to work to come into the AC and be in the cold AC all day. I just was." And I knew exactly what she meant. She just she went outside on her porch, she said, and she grabbed a quick cup of coffee, and she didn't do anything but just stand there and grab that fresh air for as quick as she could take it before she had to get in her car, get into the traffic, breathe in that air, and then go step up to her job and sit as a teller behind a desk and deal with people all day long in the cold air conditioning. And then by the time she'd get home today, the heat would be back up to scorching, and she'd miss it, and she'd get just a little bit of that left. And she just was. Well, isn't that what recess is? Wasn't that back when we were kids, that time of the day when we could just be just us and do nothing but maybe laugh and run about? And I don't know about most of you, but often I used to just sit around and play with some leaves and look at some rocks and watch the shadows on the concrete. And I would do what they say now, and can Google it on urbandictionary.com, and it's chillax. I used to chillax on my recess. And I was pretty cool and chilled out there, and I could go back and do me some work there and do some studying and pass me a test or two when I got back. And I liked Foursquare, and I liked kickball, and I was the last to be picked, by the way, for pretty much every team. Yeah, the last to be picked. Nobody really wanted Sarah on the team, but that was all right. I was still mighty good at Foursquare. Wasn't good at anything else. I was no good at baseball or softball or whatever else it was. I was good at the motocross. That was my sport, and so I was considered kind of the strange kid because I did sports outside of school. But either way, anything that was a collaborative sport team effort at the school level, I was no good at that. But that was all right. I was good at Foursquare. I really was good at that. I like it. That was fun stuff. And it was great to do that at recess. I was no good at volleyball either. I could serve a mean volleyball, but once I was serving, that was it. I was done. But that's all right. That's all right. It was great because we were outside. And I remember being outside, and I remember hearing the leaves changing. I remember that. And the autumn coming in, and it felt good. Yeah, and I wasn't that wrapped up in the time going by or the month going by too fast. I was talking to my friend about that. And some of us that get paid at the end of the month, we get paid once a month. Some of us educators are like that. Other people that are getting checks on disabilities and things like that, they get paid once a month. My friend has MS, and we were having breakfast yesterday, and she gets paid at the end of the month. And we said, you know what? Do you know that a lot of people that get paid once a month, especially those with disabilities and that are struggling, their lives are going by faster than everybody else? We thought, well, that's funny. And why is that? Well, you're so stressed about your money, and you're so stressed about your pay that you're like, come on into the month, come on into the month. So you're clicking off your days that much faster than everybody else. You can't kick back. You're like, is it the 28th? Oh, it's the 29th. No, it's the 30th. Hurry up, hurry up. Oh, no, finally it's the 31st. So really, technically, you're hurrying your life faster than everyone else. So technically, you're racing through life faster than everyone else. So actually, you're losing time. And that doesn't actually seem fair. We thought about that yesterday. We just were thinking about that. Speaking about that, there was yet another funeral for another fallen Dallas police officer this week, and I was privileged to attend. Yes, Dallas police have lost another, and they have, I don't know, they have taken quite a hit lately. Their loss has been substantial, in my opinion. And that was Senior Corporal James Gibbons. They called him Jamie. And he was a motorcycle officer. And he was killed by a suspected drunk driver. And this man, Senior Corporal Jamie Gibbons, was serving on a funeral procession at 05:30, which is 5:30 a.m. on I-20 at Bonnie View and I-20. He was with his motorcycle. He died with his motorcycle, which, after learning more about him, that was his love. He was on his motorcycle if he was on duty or not. He was quite a motorcycle enthusiast. And he was on duty for the Dallas PD at 5:30 a.m. at Bonnie View and I-20. And he was working a funeral procession for yet another police officer who had died himself. So they were, him and his brothers and sisters out there on the highway were stopping traffic and doing the beautiful honors owed to this other fallen police officer who was being transported to East Texas. And this particular senior captain, Tyrone Andrews, had died of cancer. So our fallen Dallas PD, Jamie Gibbons, was holding up this ramp at Bonnie View and I-20 for this fallen senior captain, Tyrone Andrews, when he was struck and killed by the suspected drunk driver, and he lost his life. Gibbons was a 32-year veteran of the Dallas PD, and he was months away from his retirement, a father and husband. And the service was at Prestonwood Baptist Church, my church, and it was absolutely beautiful. Once again, that's what brought me to Prestonwood Baptist Church, is how I'd been to several funerals there, and I was so awe-inspired by how they do their funerals there for our first responders and military, and it brought me there to that beautiful church, and the service was again so beautiful. And I pull up, and of course the parking lot is absolutely filled with first responders, and there's a ginormous American flag shared between the ladders of two fire trucks, just so gorgeously hanging there. It just, such a beacon, and then the parking lot is just filled, and then the motorcycle police are just all in unison. Their bikes are just parked so perfectly in rows, and it just was phenomenal. And we go inside, and everyone's in uniform, and people, I mean, oh my gosh, individuals came from so far. I mean, I think every state. It's unbelievable. And some rode, on their motorcycles as far away from is New York and so forth. It's just phenomenal. It's just, I don't know what to say. And we went in, and the service was beautiful. And of course, the chief of police of the Dallas PD, she's just, I just think she's amazing. This woman she's humble and gracious, and she's such a leader, and she speaks so eloquently, and I just love it when she gets up there and leads her men and women, and what a beautiful choice to be the Dallas chief. and then the subsequent speakers after that, it just was wonderful. So I had to leave early. I had class, and I didn't get to see the rest of the service, but excuse me. And when I left, they were getting ready to render honors outside and so forth, and then as far as I know, there was a big procession that went all the way up to Oklahoma, where they had a private burial up there in Oklahoma for Senior Corporal Givens. So our prayers to the Givens family, and then of course his family in blue and in red, our fire and police all across this entire nation, because really it's amazing how by their protocol and tradition how they hold the stitching of our nation together. It's amazing. I think about the flag, and the flag, of course, a proper flag is stitched together, and it's amazing how they hold this all together. It's it was a sweltering hot day again, and they're all in their thick uniforms, wool gloves, and they just stand so silently, and they're grieving, and they've got to be so hot in this heat, and they don't stop. They don't stop. And then of course we've lost so many since. I mean, it just keeps going and going on and on and on. So anyway, just wanted to bring that up. The other topic I wanted to also say today is also about my summer course. I've learned a lot here too, and that is we are covering the U.S. Constitution. And I've had another opportunity to do some thinking. We've had some debates and discussions, and they've been more question markish. That's a new word I've created. We're going to add that to urbandictionary.com. Question markish. No. There's been a lot of question mark thoughts. I say that because I see that look on their face, but they don't ask the question. I say, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? I see an imaginary question, like a little bubble outside their mind, and then there's no words coming out. And I say, what are you thinking? And so I've been drawing it out of them, and collectively they've had a lot of questions in our current discussions over the Constitution, and so that's drawn me to ask some questions. Why are they full of so many questions, particularly right now, more than I've noticed in years past? And I think what has occurred here is there is a fight or flight mechanism going on. And I've seen that since the shooting that went on in Florida, when the youth walked out in droves out of their schools. And my curiosity here is, of course, I'm not experienced in psychology or anything like that. I have no degrees in anything like that. I'm just a perceiver of social behavior. So we have all these youth that leave their schools after the shootings, right? And they leave, and they like, I'm running out of my schools. I'm not going back in that school. Okay, well, a lot of that is a fight or flight, in my opinion. They don't want to be in that school. They don't want to be in their schools. They're frightened. And they're mad. They're mad at who? They're mad at the adults. They don't like the adults. Why? I don't like you because you're not fixing anything. The kids keep shooting in the schools. My buddy next to me just took an AK out of his backpack and walked into school, took an Uber to school, or whatever he did. I don't know. And we didn't think Frank would do this, or whatever. Why is he doing this? Now I don't know if Bill next to me is going to do this, or Sally, and now I can't concentrate at school. So I'm just going to leave school. It's easier that way. It's safer outside somehow. All right, so that's what they do, right? So they don't like this. They don't like the adults anymore. Why? Why not? Well, look at TV. On TV, everybody's fighting. The adults are all fighting. Congress is fighting with presidents, and presidents are fighting with Congress, and everybody's fighting. Even the stars that I watch in the movies that I thought were my heroes are all complaining, and they're all mad, and they're going off on the leaders that we thought we could trust. And mom and dad are divorced, and they're fighting, and mom can't pay the bills, and dad's we don't know where he is or whatever. Okay, so they don't trust anybody. So they think they're out on their own. So now you got these youth that think they're gonna go start a whole new revolution and start a whole new America, right? And so they're gonna quit and they're gonna just rewrite it all. So that's what they think. They think they're gonna rewrite it all, and then that way they can make it go their way. Well, instinctually, that actually makes sense if you go by instinct. Human behavior, animal behavior, any behavior going on of instinct will do that. It's called survival. Well, if we keep acting like we're acting the way we are, we can't blame them for trying to survive. So we have to correct our faults and make sure that we lock this back down and get it back to what needs to be done correctly. We can't go back to status quo because status quo is a mistake. Status quo is what got us here. So we have to get this thing balanced out correctly. So my students, who are very respectful to me, but I also see me as one of those adults, are in a quandary. Well, we like you. We think you're cool. We think you're smart. We know you care about us. And we know you're doing the best thing for us, but you're still the enemy somehow. We don't know what to do with you. And then you're talking about stuff that all those other people talk about, and now you're at the Constitution. I don't know, man. I'm not sure. I think it is us against you, really, even though we really do like you, and we really do respect you, and we really do know you care. This is tough. Yeah, we got this imaginary bubble over our head, and we're thinking stuff. We don't know what to say to you. So we don't know what to say, so we're not going to say anything. Okay, well, we got to figure this out, right? Well, I don't know. Should we? Maybe we should. All right, what are we going to do about this? So we move forward with it. Turns out they don't want the Constitution. They don't like the Constitution. Well, that's not good. Why? Why don't you like the Constitution? Well, why don't we just be done with it? Why don't we get that out of the way? Okay, why do you want to knock everything out of the way? Well, everything's in the way. Why is everything in the way? Well, nothing's going right. Everything you all wrote, everything you all made happen is in the way. It's all survival. It's all instinctually set for survival. It's in their way. Their worlds have become combative. Their worlds have become dangerous. Their theaters are dangerous. Their classrooms are dangerous. Their futures are not what they thought it was going to be. Everything's become dangerous. They don't think that anybody in my generation or above has got their act together. They don't trust us. They are showing that behavior in their animosity and anger and violence against their own protectors. So, are they right? No. Are they trying to survive and they're going to do this no matter what happens? Sure, if it doesn't get corrected. So we move forward with our conversation. And when it gets described to them about things they've never been told before, like, what are alternatives? Well, if you run off completely free on your own, well, there's problems there. If you run off without your protectors, you're not protected. If you run against your government, somebody's going to come in and take over, okay? If you go off balance of power and another power takes over, and the unitary superpower that exists right now, the United States of America, loses its seat in the balance of power theory, and it's taken over by another power, such as anything that's maybe communist, or if a caliphate takes over, whatever, then we are subjugated by that and the laws thereof. then where do we go from there? Oh. And, well, how about this? What if the government were to be subjugated in any form or fashion, either within its own self through ego and oversaturated power or takeover? How do you ensure your own protections as we the people? And the document of the Constitution is what we have to protect ourselves. The light bulbs came on. Wow, they came on. They were on fire. Whoa. That document's what we got. We got that document. We like that document. We like paperwork. Paperwork's good. That paperwork's awesome. Of course, we did it with a much more professional tone and so forth, right? They realized the facets and the tenets of reality and the fact that what freedom isn't just running. And that the fight or flight sort of mechanism of what survival is not going to ensure them the constraints of safety that they actually need. So it would, and of course, a lot of this actually wasn't discussed with them one-on-one. This is me figuring this out from my perception. A lot of this was sort of asking questions mostly. Like, so this is how you feel, huh? So why do you believe that we really should just get rid of the Constitution? You know, those types of questions. There's no reason to make them worry about anything. But this is my conclusions of where we've been in the class. It's interesting, too, how they all feel the same way. Whereas before, I might have had one or two students that might have thought this. It is definitely a them and us. It's everybody's on the same page. So the masses in this generation, this millennial generation, are all buying into one theory. And they're sharing common thought. That is certain. So they are more apt to buy into the idea of hanging on to the belief of our Constitution and understanding with the correct instruction of why our Constitution is so valuable and important, and understanding what we the people really is, and getting what the Bill of Rights is, understanding what inalienable rights are, and understanding that a blind belief system, that if we just kind of go along our everyday life and just make sure we've got our cell phone working and deciding what we want every day, you know, and that the government's just sort of got this, you know, is not necessarily right, and that they are the designers of the future, and that it's not an individualism future, and it's a collectivism future, and that our history and the knowledge of history and carrying on that history is where we've got to take it. It isn't just, well, we're just going to write it the way we want it for ourselves and for now. They very, very, very rarely think about anybody else's tomorrow. It is very much about how it is for them now and for their tomorrow. For anyone else's tomorrow, it's not talked about at all, unless a couple of them might have a small child, and even then it's very rarely discussed. So it's an individualism like I've never seen it before. But this is something that is starting to come around in conversation for good with the right instruction. Here's my issue. They've had 12 years of American academic schooling. They are arriving to community college level, and the conversation is starting at zero. at 0. There is no conversation starter. We are starting as if we are in grade school level. Perhaps if they've been to a Christian academic academy, perhaps if they've had some homeschooling, perhaps if they've had some very astute parents that were really involved in some civic talk at the dinner table, we've got some starter students going on. But in general, it's a start at the beginning conversation. And most don't have any historical background of any of the wars. As a military historian, that's a troubling trend, that they might know a little bit of the buzzwords on maybe World War II, perhaps. So they definitely know Hitler. They know all about him. They know that, and that's and they know a bit about maybe the parades of World War II, and we were the big heroes, and that's about all they've got when they arrive. The veteran student that arrives in the class on the first day, I can pick he or she out instantly. They all sit in the classroom. I don't know anybody. About 40 students or a little bit more, and I can silently in my head say him, and her. I know exactly who the veteran student is. They are sitting upright. Their book is out. Their pen is out. They have everything they need. Their hygiene practice is spot on. They're polite. They're ready to learn. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. I can tell them clearly. They're dressed like anybody else. I'm not picking them out because they're in a uniform. They generally are closed off. That's a protective measure of their own selves because they're still trying to acclimate into society. They do attempt to integrate with their peers, their cohorts. It does not work. Not usually. It's very, very rare I've seen it work. And that's because their peers don't let them in. Their peers will sense that they're different, and they do not mesh with them. Their peer and cohort groups do not make attempts to work with them. They will herd, the masses will herd together, and they will become more and more collective around them, and they will outnumber them. The veteran student will become quieter and quieter if they ever got vocal, and the veteran student will more likely, unless they're married and attached and got a solid foundation in their home life, they will disappear and they'll be gone. Retention will drop, and from there I don't know if they become a statistic or not, but they will disappear. And this is a common occurrence that goes on and on and on, semester after semester. And this is a critical crisis that has to be addressed. So this is where we are on that. There's a student paper here. We went out to the courtyard. There was 3 blocks. They're cubes, and they're stacked on top of each other, and they're only formed together by one weld to each piece. I don't really know how to describe it, but there's 3 cubes there, and we were at the beginning of the early American history course, and I was just curious. We were talking about how when the Spaniards had come across the Atlantic and they were sailing west, and they came across the Western Hemisphere and began to colonize and so forth, and we were talking about the different the Western Hemisphere and then the different continents and so forth like that. So I just said, hey, go on outside and look at those 3 cubes and just, again, I don't tell them what to think. I just said, you go think about it and just tell me, what you, just go look at those cubes, and you're in this class, go come up with something. And that's what I tell them, and that's where I leave it. And so this is one of the write-ups I got. This is the sculpture in the courtyard. I am standing here in the courtyard at the campus, looking at this metallic cubic structure that stands in the grass. There are 3 cubes, each standing atop the previous and descending in size as it ascends in height. So yeah, as they get the biggest ones at the bottom, then there's a smaller one in the middle, and then the top one obviously is the smallest. It looks perfectly balanced. It seems a perfect equilibrium. When we stack things precariously, any slight adjustment in the atmosphere may tumble our achievement. Despite the perfect balance that this sculpture seems to strike, it is merely a facade. In reality, the pieces are welded together, unable to topple by weather or any unwarranted push. It is built in such a way that it can't fail. The question of how did the United States come to be what it is today? That is actually one of the questions I asked. The fact is, there were so many places that we could have gone wrong. So many battles that we could have lost that would have changed the course completely. But I argue that from the beginning, our forefathers have manufactured a system that no matter how badly we as a nation would want to, couldn't fail. That is what I saw when I looked at the sculpture. So I thought that was pretty cool. And lastly, this is another write-up. Steel boxes. The metal squares that sit in the middle of the campus are a form of artwork that is open to interpretation. My view of the hollow stacked squares is that of a country of America. Strung together like the squares, we are tough and made of a very durable material. The squares covered with metal, but the American people are covered with patriotism. Also, like the boxes, we stand together. The 3 metal squares stacked to form a singular unit standing tall in the courtyard. I believe Americans are the same way. When we come together, we always stand tall throughout multiple wars and challenges. If you separate the squares from each other, we tear apart at the welds, and we become compromised and weak. Americans are similar in this way as well. When we are torn apart, we become weak. I also have another interpretation of the squares. Each one is a different branch of office in the United States government. Alone, each branch is hollow and can do nothing by themselves. But together, they can change our government for better or for worse. The base square would be Congress because they are one of the more influential parts of our government, the base. They decide most of our laws and make sure we do not bring ourselves to ruin. The second square is the executive branch, standing atop Congress, pushing legislation and improving our country or destroying it. Finally, the judicial branch is atop the square, the very top, presiding over all. They have the final judgment for everyone in our country. They watch over us from the top and settle innumerable issues that would continue for eternity if not for their interpretation. So I thought that was very nice as well. The other thing that I thought was pretty cool was this paper too. On the anniversary of the Apollo landing, I had them also, of course it's early American history and we're talking Constitution and so forth, but I also had them watch the Apollo landing. My dad was part of that program, And it was an anniversary, current events, so I had them watch a clip on YouTube. And so they have not had modern American history yet, and so I want to explain something in this particular paper, because I think it's important to hear this. So I gave them a YouTube clip to watch, and then I wanted them to just give a little review on what they thought of that in regards to the early American history that, of course, ends at Reconstruction at the very end of the American Civil War. So, putting that together was for them to figure out. And to, no wrong answer, just whatever they wanted to do. So this student writes this: "The first landing on the moon revealed to me how people will come together to support a greater cause despite the surrounding circumstances. There may have been rising tensions in the world at this time, but they didn't really seem to matter. When Buzz and Neil landed on the moon, their accomplishments signified much more than American advancement. They showcased what mankind was capable of doing. This meant that all people, no matter their origin, could finally unite and be proud to experience the greatness of man. This film also made me believe that there must have been a lot of hope floating around in the air. The first astronauts to set foot on the moon had to become a golden standard of what was possible if people truly reached for the stars. Due to this, people around the world must have had a lot of hope for reduced military and economic tensions among nations and hope for improved standard of living. After all, if man could achieve the unworldly, then surely he could handle the problems persisting on his home turf." The last thing the video made me realize was that lots of stuff can be accomplished in the world if we really boggle down and make it a priority. Here's your key point. In 1969, the Americans were fully invested in the space race, and it showed. It might have took several tries, but eventually they got it done. I just can't help but wonder how many things could have been done nowadays if we had global community that put our heads down and we fought together in the world like we did in 1969. Perhaps poverty, disease, and violence could have been reduced if we did as well as we did in 1969. Whatever the case may be, the Apollo 11 landing showcased human brilliance and a willingness to come together to support one another regardless of the situation. Okay, here's my point. Lovely paper. I think he writes beautifully. Here's my thing. He hasn't taken the second half of history yet, so he doesn't know about what's going on in 1969 yet, although he's had obviously 12 years of school and a diploma. No negative connotation to this young man whatsoever. My point is he's had 12 years of education in the American educational system. He's obviously a little confused on events in 1969 as far as world peace. And the idea is that many of our universities and our community colleges have been given the green light to forego the second half of American history as a requirement. Many schools have already moved forward with it, and so the higher education institutions, many across our country in universities, are now only requiring the first half of American history, which is up to the end, really the end of the American Civil War. Some go into Reconstruction, some don't. Some just end the American Civil War itself. So without the second half, which starts technically at Reconstruction, which would be really 1865, that's really tasked to go into present day, most, by timing, some teachers go as far as really the Vietnam War. Some don't go past the end of World War II. It really depends on the instructor. But as not having it as a requirement, they are allowed to substitute that second half history for electives, and those electives are quite numerous and quite dynamic in choices. So with that said, that we have a lot of our youth in our nation now that are not expected to take that as a required course. And that is just something that I think should be up for a conversation in our country about where we want to go forward with that when comes time for sending our kids to school and the education of our youth. And I've always said that we are free all to learn what we want and not learn, and we're free to pick and we're blessed to be free, of course, what kind of majors we want and what kind of careers we all want. But the one thing that we have to remember is that how we go forward in our futures is a collective decision as well, in the fact of the future is a national and international security issue, because what comes in the future as far as threats, balance of power, we've seen this in the Cold War, the potential for decisions that could come in the forms of questions for drafts and things like that, and who and what is at stake for volunteerism. Is it going to be an all-volunteer military or not? What will it be, a multipolar threat potential coming our way? Will it not? That is a collective issue, and all of our kids and grandkids are in those decisions. And so I think the education of our masses is a collective decision, in the form of minimal requirements of what we do educate our masses, and that's just my personal opinion, and that's a debatable question, I think, that should be talked about. So thank you again for joining me. I have enjoyed this, and I wish everyone a very, very blessed and happy beginning to August 2018.